Well, welcome back to Growth Groups this week and our series Balancing Act that we have been traveling through. And I hope that the entire series has been helpful to you, really just understanding how we can steward the different areas of our life and balance all of it together. And so we've talked about balancing our finances, and then last week, of course, looking at our time, and we had some great guests last week. And this week, we are excited about the topic of our health. And I have a question for you to think about as we start tonight, and that is this: do you think Christians should care about their health? Should Christians care about their health? And when we talk about health, we're not going to just talk about physical health. We're going to talk about our emotional health, our mental health, and our physical health, and then probably even talk a little bit about our spiritual health. But right now, I want to take you to two Bible verses as we get started, and then I will introduce my esteemed guest that is with us. And so here's what we're going to do. Read a couple verses, and then I'll introduce our guest. She's no stranger around here, but I've got a good introduction for her. So here's the verse. First is 3 John chapter 1, because there's only one chapter, and verse number 2, here's what was written. Beloved, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in health, even as thy soul prospereth. John writes, I'm praying that your emotional health would be just like, or your physical health would be just like your spiritual health. So there's some concern there to health. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse number 19 and 20, it says this: What, know you not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost which is in you, which ye have of God, and you are not your own? For you are bought with a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. The fact of the matter is this: we ask the question, should Christians care about health? The answer is yes. We should care about our mental health, we should care about our physical health, our emotional health, and our spiritual health. And to help us with this tonight is my most favorite person in all of the world, and my best friend, and the person who has taught me the most about health, and that is my wonderful wife, Hannah. So, Hannah, thanks for joining us with Growth Groups.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to just jump into some questions and ask Hannah, who really has cared about health for her whole life, and I'm thankful for the study that she's put into all of the lessons that she brings on health to a lot of people, spoken about this to a number of groups, and so I'm looking forward to our discussion tonight. So, Hannah, first question I want to ask you is, what are some common pitfalls that we have in relation to our health?
Okay, so I love this conversation because, like you said at the beginning, health applies to our whole being, spirit, soul, body. And a lot of times we forget that as beings made in the image of God, we are threefold. We're body, soul, and spirit, and we should have a concern and a care about a wholeness, a completeness. And a study that I did just this past weekend that I shared with some of the ladies in Indiana, we talked about how God, there's a verse that says God makes our way complete or perfect, and that he brings wholeness into our life. And God does care about body, soul, and spirit. And I think that some of the pitfalls, to answer your question, one of the biggest pitfalls is when we, as Christians, kind of separate the idea that we are body, soul, and spirit. So we say, okay, I'm at church to learn about being a spiritual person. I'm at church to learn about being a Christian.
Right.
But anything about my body, I don't want to talk about that at church. Like, just leave that back home. And I think sometimes it might be an honest mistake because we think of things as being physical or spiritual. So
Right.
we think, oh, if we're talking about the human body, we're talking about something physical. And so, that's secular. It's something not of God.
Right.
But there's so much in the Bible where God actually talks about how much he does care about our physical being as well as our spiritual being.
That's awesome.
So that's, I would say, the biggest pitfall that comes to mind is just thinking, that it's not a spiritual matter when it really is.
Yeah. Do you think that, and this is not a question on here, but do you think that has been historically in all churches and all Christianity, or do you think that our American culture, Christian culture, has affected that a lot?
I think it's huge in America. America focuses so much on the physical, right? And so I think that when you think about physical health, America puts an image connected to what it means to be healthy, a specific body type or a specific image that you've got to strive for. And that can lead to idolatry. It can lead to something really unhealthy for us as believers. So I think that we maybe in American culture have to fight even harder to understand that God does care about our body, soul, spirit, our mental health, our emotional health, but he doesn't want us to have any gods before him. He doesn't want us to idolize or worship a certain body image or a certain appeal that we might have to the world around us.
Yeah. All right, second question. What do you think are some of the most helpful commands and principles about our health, managing our health? And then I'm going to tag on, what do you think are some of the most important warnings?
Okay. So principles
God's
and
word.
warnings. Okay.
So let's do like principles and commands first.
Okay.
And then we'll go to warnings.
Okay. So just Bible discussions on health that come to my mind. I think about in Corinthians where you shared, we are a temple of God. God lives inside of us. Our body, it specifically says your body is the temple of God, not just your soul, but your body. So that matters to God. I think about verses in Psalms where it says that we were curiously wrought. We were intricately formed in our mother's womb. Like God cared so much about every single individual that he knit our bodies together. How could a God like that not care about our physical health? I think about the verse that says he counts every hair on our head. There's so many verses that point to the fact that he cares deeply about us in every way. I think about verses in Matthew 5 where it talks about how God clothes the lilies of the field, and he clothes us, and he cares so much for us that he cares that we have clothing and protection against our needs in this life. And then what was your other question?
What are some principles, some commands, and some warnings about physical health?
So one principle, so one principle I think that is a challenge to me personally, and also it's kind of a guiding verse toward health, is a verse out of 1 Corinthians where the Apostle Paul, who actually, he says some pretty strong things about physical, he talks a lot about the flesh versus the spirit, the war that we face between the two. And he talks a lot about just putting his flesh in a place where he's going to tell it what to do and not let it tell him what to do. And so I love this verse in 1 Corinthians where he says, instead, I discipline my body and bring it under strict control so that after preaching to others, I myself will not be disqualified. Yeah. How convicting is that? That especially talking to someone who literally preaches to others, right? Like as church leadership, we preach to others all the time. And so how convicting is it to think that we are to bring our bodies under strict control so that people won't look at our lives and say, okay, you've got this message, but you don't care about your body that God gave you. And it does affect our testimony. I think that's what Paul was getting at, was his testimony as a Christian matters, body, soul, and spirit. So, it matters that we live a life that reflects control. And that doesn't, there's a lot of things that, automatically are scary. When you think about bringing your body under control, you think, oh no, I'm going to have to eat nothing but salad for the rest of my life if I'm going to live this way as a Christian. That's not actually the case. But I think that there is just an acknowledging that God really cares about this matter and that it does speak to the world of what we believe about him.
Right. All right, question number 3 then is, what are some general thoughts that you would give about managing our health in a biblical way?
Okay, so one thought I had is just recognizing that God values us in every way. And it's important that we are not comparing ourselves to others, also indicated in Scripture, not comparing, but rather being diligent to take whatever steps He is leading us to bring our bodies under that strict control or submission or whatever word you want to use, that you're guiding your body. And it's not in a comparative way, but it's, God, what is it that I need to put under control in my life? And I think we all can answer that question for ourselves. We all know our own tendencies. We know where we tend to just go all toward the flesh, or we know the areas that maybe, need a little work. I think also recognizing that health is more than just a salad. It's more than just exercising at the gym. It's more than a gym membership. Health is managing our choices in a lot of areas. Health is choosing to have the right relationship with food. Food can either be our servant or our master, as can a lot of things in life. So health is choosing to allow food to serve us well, but not to have dominion over us. A practical tip about health when it comes to food is to avoid using words like addictive or irresistible when you're describing food, to say, oh, that is so addicting, or that's irresistible. We're literally speaking ownership to the food. When we say things like that, we're saying that food has power over me. So just having kind of a practical relationship with food and saying, yes, I can enjoy all the wonderful things that God created to eat, but it's not going to be my master. Health is having the right relationship with exercise. In recent years, I've heard the phrase tossed around, and I listen to a lot of health podcasts. I'm kind of a health nerd in a way. And I've heard the phrase come around a lot of times that says, sitting is the new smoking. Have you heard that?
Yes.
And so what they're trying to say in that is that, in American culture, we do so much sitting that it has become as detrimental to our health as in taking a substance. And so having the right relationship with exercise is just recognizing God created our bodies to move. Our bodies are in the best health when we move. So I'm going to make myself get up and move around. And it doesn't mean I have to be this crazy athlete, but I'm just going to recognize this is good for my health. And there's a lot of things that you can look up. Look up just the statistics about going for a walk each day.
Yeah.
And it reduces your tendency to catch a cold by like 75% just by going for a 20-minute walk. So there's so many things. It increases your heart health. So I'm talking physical health here, but there's a lot of things, your relationship with food, your relationship with exercise. I think also just choosing not to quit. Sometimes we tend to give up so easily. And I know I've been here lots of times, and it's just like, we need to find fresh motivation and recognize that God cares about this and just look somewhere else. Sometimes you just need to change up what you're doing, but just don't quit. Even if you need to change it up often and regularly, not to just give it up and say, I'm done caring about this because this isn't working for me. All of us get there to where something kind of plateaus,
Right.
and it's like you feel like you're not seeing. And a lot of times what the results we're looking for are attached to that image, like we said at the beginning, that body image or that certain look we want to have. And I think that can discourage us from even continuing and pursuing health. And then I kind of want to take a little shift, if that's okay, toward like emotional and mental health, because that's just as much a part of it as the physical. And the Bible talks a lot about mental health. And I think David is probably a good a person to look to. He always, he's very open and raw about his emotions and his struggles. And he was like, his soul is like desperate unto the point of death so many times. And then he always just shifts his focus back to God, back to the strength. And, his eyes are fixed on God. And I think that we, in order to have good spiritual and emotional and mental health, we have to continually shift our eyes back to God.
Right.
And we have to constantly be saying, okay, the way I've been thinking, the patterns I've been, using in my life are not healthy. So I'm making a change, just like we do physically, same with the exercise and the food. We've got to shift our eyes back to God.
Yeah.
And with mental health, God gives us a whole list of things to think on, ways to think, and, things that are true, honest, lovely, pure, of good report. Think on these things, and the peace of God will be with you. And so many times, how many times do we find ourselves just in this really depressed state, and we realize that we have not been caring for our mental health
Yeah.
God's way.
Yeah.
And so, God is a well-rounded God when it comes to guiding us into health. And he cares about our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, how we eat, how we exercise, everything about us. He wants us to experience wholeness as much as we can while living on this sin-cursed earth that is a place of sickness. And, we all have things that fight against our flesh,
Yeah.
but he wants us to pursue that wholeness.
Yeah, that's really good. I would say this as we wrap up, that, when we think about health, I think really realizing and recognizing that just like in any other area of life, that we're stewards. Our body, our mind, our emotions, they're a gift from God for us. And I love how one author writes to this when he writes about managing and stewarding our health so that we can serve God longer. And not necessarily maybe in full-time ministry or something like that, but all of us want to use our life for God. And we can't if we're always sick. We can't if we are mentally breaking down. We can't if we're emotionally overcharged all the time. And so there's got to be some balance in that. And so I would encourage you tonight, before we go to discussion groups, I would encourage you to take some of these thoughts and maybe ask the Lord to evaluate your life and to show you where some things are out of balance. Maybe you haven't been paying attention to your physical health. Unfortunately, in the Christian world, a lot of people go to the verse that says, bodily exercise profiteth little. And so they go, who cares? But then we indulge and we eat in a bunch of things we shouldn't, and we don't exercise, and we gain weight, and pretty soon we're in an unhealthy place. And America, our whole culture is that way. And I don't believe that's the way God intended it to be. So maybe ask the Lord if your physical health is out of balance, but then also taking into account that emotional health and that mental health. And, sometimes it's good. I know we'll speak into this during the question answer time, but part of investing in our health is knowing things to say no to and areas of our life where we need rest and balance. And it's okay to say no to good things because you're saying yes to the best thing. And so maybe that's some more time with your family and less work. Maybe that's a day off when you're the driver and you just want to keep going, but your body's telling you slow down. You need to take a day off. And so just ask the Lord today, God, what areas of my life am I out of balance in my health? And we have some discussion questions there. We'll talk to more of this. I will say, there's a great book out there about balance in your health. It's the book called Margin, and I read it last year. It was a big help to me. And there's, of course, the book we're going through, Stewarding Life, speaks to this well. Do you have any other resources that people could use or look up that would be helpful?
I love the Ancient Nutrition podcast. If you're a podcast person, which if you go to growth groups, I'm a podcast person, but Ancient Nutrition is a health expert that is also a Christian. So Josh Axe brings in a lot of biblical principles with a lot of just like understanding your body. And that's one that I enjoy.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your time in your growth groups, and we look forward to seeing you next week as we continue our series, Balancing Act.